The Portland Trailblazers got some great lottery luck to end up with the 3rd overall pick in this upcoming draft, and now they're ready to use that to completely change the offseason. Now, if you've been paying attention to Portland at all over the last couple of seasons, the entirety of the conversation has revolved around what to do about Damian Lillard. They've moved on from CJ McCollum. They brought in Jeremy Grant. They brought in Anthony Simons to try and be that CJ McCollum replacement. They got Shaedon Sharpe in the draft last year. They've constantly tried to shift the pieces around him over the last few seasons, with the idea being putting together a competent team around him. He's been arguably the most loyal star or superstar that the league has had in this entire era, despite a team around him that, yes, made the Western Conference Finals once and has been okay at times, but has never really reached true championship contender status. And typically, when that happens and you're a star, the caliber of player that Damian Lillard is, you ask out, you want to move on. And now that they've ended up with the 3rd overall pick in this draft, they're prepared to move this pick in what would be one of the bigger trades of the offseason and could completely change everything, not just for Portland, but for the entirety of the league. Now, first and foremost, we have to talk about, is this a good idea or not? Before we get to the actual trades, the things that have been rumored, the things that could happen for Portland. In my opinion, I totally understand why Portland wants to build around Dame, and honestly, why Dame still wants to be there. I kind of get it. He really likes being the guy that the franchise is built around. He really likes the idea that the entirety of the team is going to be built around him and around what complements him well and trying to putting him in a position to win. If he was to go to a different team, the Lakers, variety of different situations, he would just be another guy. He wouldn't be the main guy. He'd be the second, maybe even the 3rd best player on the team. And he prefers being the guy, prefers having things built around him. And if he's going to win a title, he wants to do it in Portland. It would mean more to him in Portland than it would on other teams. And that totally makes sense to me. However, if you're the Trailblazers, there's no way that you can look at this roster right now and say, we're one really good wing away from being on the level of Denver, Phoenix, Boston in the Eastern Conference, Milwaukee in the Eastern Conference. There's no way that you can convince yourselves that as great as Dame was this past year, he's a first-team All-NBA caliber guy, depending on, where your games played threshold is, and obviously towards the end of the year, basically just didn't play at all. Like, he's that kind of good. But the rest of the roster simply isn't. Like, Jeremy Grant's fine, Simons is fine, Nurkic is fine, Shaedon Sharpe's an exciting, interesting young player, but bringing in some of the guys we're going to talk about later, I think it's clear that they want a wing that can guard and can create, which every team in the league does, but alongside Damian Lillard, that does not make you a contender. It might make you a 2nd round playoff team. Maybe you can get lucky like Dallas did a year ago and make it to the conference finals. That could certainly happen. And maybe that's their goal. Maybe that's all they're going for. But for me, the much more obvious scenario here, if you're Portland, as it has been for years, would be to trade away Damian Lillard. Like, you're basically been gifted the 3rd overall pick in a draft that is clearly a top 3 draft. And you're going to get one of the best prospects in the entire class to build alongside Shaedon Sharpe, Anthony Simons, and some other pieces you have there moving forward. In addition to what you would get in exchange for Damian Lillard, the decision here is absolutely clear. It's also clear that that's just not what Portland's going to do. They've never been about that. And to me, honestly, it reminds me of where San Antonio was a few seasons ago, where they kept trying to be decent with DeMar DeRozan and a couple of other guys. And they targeted this draft with Victor Wembanyama as the draft that they're going to progress towards tanking, towards being bad, trading away DeJounte Murray. And it got them in the position that they are now, where I think they have one of the brightest futures in the entire league now, just because of all the assets they've acquired over the last couple of seasons, as well as bringing in Victor Wembanyama. That's where Portland could find themselves in 2 or 3 seasons if they would just give up on the Damian Lillard thing, yet they refuse to. So now we're going to talk about who they could possibly bring in by trading away the 3rd overall pick. Now, it'd have to be the 3rd pick, and, Anthony Simons is a decently tradable salary. There's, a couple of other pieces here on the roster they can move, but primarily it's the 3rd pick, some other draft compensation, and maybe Simons or someone else in these kinds of scenarios. There's actually not a lot of great situations here because every team in the league needs the exact kind of player that Portland is looking for here. One of the ones that's been thrown around a lot is Mikal Bridges from Brooklyn. If they wanted to try and move on from him and kind of jumpstart a rebuild of their own, they had a lot of interest in Bridges at the trade deadline after acquiring him from Phoenix. Teams offering 4+ first-round picks in exchange for Mikal Bridges, and they decided to hang on to him. And there's a couple of different reasons for that. One, he played extremely well after the trade deadline. I think it's doubtful that they're going to want to move on from him after how well he played, all the potential that he showed. And two, his contract is awesome. Like, he's one of the best two-way players in the league, certainly one of the best two-way wings in the league, and is making between like $20 to $23 million over the next couple of seasons. Like, that's nothing compared to where some of these salaries are going to be going over the next couple of seasons. I do like his fit in Portland. I've talked before about the fact that I don't think Mikal Bridges is like suddenly Kevin Durant or anything, but if you want to ask him to be like Chris Middleton on a title team, like, I think that's doable. I think that's an archetype that he fits into well, given how he can defend, how he can shoot, and some of the on-ball creation that he's shown. But it seems like Brooklyn Brooklyn would want more than the third pick plus Anthony Simons for Mikal Bridges. Now, if it were me and I'm Brooklyn, I would ask for more. I'd ask for more draft compensation. But if for example, I felt like I could get Scoot Henderson at the third overall pick, I'd really consider trading away Mikal Bridges for the third pick, Anthony Simons and some other draft compensation, because as great as Bridges was last year, there's no guarantee he's going to continue to be that great this upcoming season. There's almost no guarantee that even if he is that good, that it's going to matter at all to your team, that you're going to be, anything but just like the 7th or the 8th seed or something. And you can really capitalize on the value of a player that is very good, but it's also like 28, 29, like doesn't really fit the timeline that Brooklyn's probably going to be on here eventually. And I think it would be a good move for them to at least explore it. I don't expect it to happen, but that's the kind of move that Portland's looking to make here with this third overall pick. And honestly, amongst like legitimate, realistic destinations, that's pretty much it. I mean, you could maybe talk yourself into like Zach LaVine from Chicago, depending on what they want to do with their roster. There's some Toronto stuff that's interesting. OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam, both those have been thrown around. Again, it's pretty easy to build the structure here. Draft compensation, third overall pick, some salaries. I don't know that Siakam or OG really put Portland over the top in a significant way. I also don't really know what the direction is for the Raptors moving forward. There was some Jaylen Brown buzz, but to me, unless it's Mikal Bridges, unless you find a way to make that happen, this makes absolutely no sense to me if you're Portland. You just do one of two things. Either just use the pick. Be like, hey, we got great luck here. We ended up with a third overall pick that we shouldn't have had. We tanked towards the end of the year to get better lottery luck. It worked out. Let's just take one of the wings in the class. Let's take Scoot Henderson and we'll figure it out. Trade Dame or not, that should be one of the two scenarios. Just use the pick. Just take a good young player. You've got Shaedon Sharpe, whatever you think of Anthony Simons, and this guy, even whoever you pick, even if you don't trade away Dame, you're starting to build something at least relatively interesting. And if this was a different situation, like if this draft was very clearly a top 2 draft and the rest of the class wasn't very good and you have the third pick, it's a little bit more defensible to try and build something around Dame. Or if you're, for example, the way the Lakers were in 2019, where they move up to 4th in the lottery, they use that in order to get Anthony Davis alongside LeBron, which clearly made them a championship contender. That kind of a situation is different. And no disrespect to Damian Lillard, but that's not where he's at, nor is that where he's going to be at over the next couple of seasons, given how poor the rest of the roster is at a championship level. Like if your goal is, if you're Portland, to be a second round playoff team, then sure, trade the third pick from Mikal Bridges or Bradley Beal from Washington, whatever you want to do. That's fine. If that's your goal and you just want to be competent, you want to sell tickets, you want to sell playoff tickets, and you want Dame to retire as, this guy that made the conference finals once, never made the finals, never even came close to winning a title, but scored the most points in Trailblazers history. If that's what you want to do, then that's fine. Then if that's your goal, you'll certainly accomplish that by trading away the third pick. But to me, you're trying to build a competent roster throughout the entirety of the Trailblazers franchise, not just for the next few seasons that Damian Lillard is a really, really good player. It doesn't make any sense at all. There's no upgrade you can make to this roster with just the third pick that's going to turn it into a championship group. If you want to do like third pick and Simons for a wing and then trade all, 4 future first round picks for this other guy that's also going to elevate you and upgrade at the 5 spot and all these different things, then maybe we can talk. Maybe if you really are that committed to building something around Dame, you might be looking at a team that's a legitimate contender, but the West is so strong and you can't just continue to think, maybe we'll win 45 games this year. Like that's not a feasible thing when you have a player in Dame that has real value around the league and has for years, and that might not last very much longer. It reminds me of situations we've seen in the past, and I wish the Blazers would just give up on this, but history tells us they won't.